Have you ever faced a challenge so overwhelming, it felt like divine intervention was your only hope? That's exactly how the samurai felt when they saw the Mongol fleet approaching Japan's shores. Imagine a lone warrior facing an endless sea of invaders. It's a moment when all seems lost. But sometimes, the universe has other plans. In this video, we'll explore how Japan's darkest hour became its greatest legend. Get ready to discover how an unexpected force changed the course of a nation, in a tale that'll leave you amazed at the power of perseverance and the mysteries of fate. Imagine you're a samurai in 1274, standing on the shores of Hakata Bay. You've heard rumors of a massive invasion force, but nothing could have prepared you for the sight before you. 30,000 Mongol warriors, their ships stretching across the horizon. Your heart races, a mix of fear and determination coursing through your veins. Kublai Khan, ruler of the largest empire in history, had set his sights on Japan. His conquest had already swept across Asia, and now it was knocking on Japan's doorstep. The Mongols weren't just bringing soldiers, they were bringing a whole new way of warfare. As the Mongol ships drew closer, you'd see something that would make your blood run cold. These weren't ordinary ships. They were floating fortresses. Thick wooden planks covered their sides, making them practically impenetrable to arrows. It was like nothing you'd ever seen before. The Mongols poured onto the beach, unleashing weapons that seemed straight out of a nightmare. Exploding bombs filled the air with fire and smoke. The sound alone was enough to make even the bravest samurai question everything they knew about battle. And their fighting style? As a samurai, you were trained for one-on-one duels. But the Mongols came at you in massive groups, a sea of warriors moving as one. It was like trying to fight a tidal wave with a sword. The samurai fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. For every Mongol that fell, it seemed like 10 more took their place. As night fell, the Mongols retreated to their ships, confident in their victory. For the samurai, it was a moment of both relief and dread. That night, as the samurai prepared for what they believed would be their last stand, an eerie calm settled over the bay. The air felt heavy, charged with energy that went beyond the tension of impending battle. Suddenly the skies darkened, and the winds began to howl. What started as a strong breeze quickly escalated into a full-blown typhoon. The Mongol ships, so formidable in battle, were now at the mercy of nature's fury. Massive waves crashed over their decks, splintering wood and tossing men into the churning sea. By dawn, the beach was littered with the wreckage of Kublai Khan's mighty fleet. Thousands of Mongol warriors, who had seemed invincible just hours before, now lay dead or dying along the shore. The samurai emerged from their camps to find that their prayers had been answered in the most unexpected way. The storm had destroyed most of the Mongol ships, along with a significant portion of their invasion force. In a single night, Kublai Khan's carefully laid plans had been torn apart by what the Japanese would come to call Kamikaze, the divine wind. The divine wind had saved Japan, but for how long? As the wreckage of Mongol ships washed up on their shores, the samurai knew this was just the beginning. They had 7 years to prepare for a storm of a different kind, one made of steel and fire. After the first invasion, Japan was on high alert. They knew Kublai Khan wouldn't take this defeat lying down. The samurai didn't have time to celebrate their miraculous victory. Instead, they got to work, determined to be ready for round 2. Japan's defensive preparations were intense. They built massive stone walls along the coastline, with steep, slippery surfaces designed to stop ships from landing and give defenders a huge advantage. Imagine trying to climb these walls while arrows rain down on you. Not fun. At the same time, samurai started practicing new team-based tactics. They moved away from individual duels and focused on working together, knowing that one-on-one combat wouldn't be effective against the Mongol army that fought in large groups. While all this was happening in Japan, Kublai Khan was fuming. He couldn't believe his massive army had been defeated by island warriors and a storm. It was time for payback, and he was going to make sure it was big. For the next 7 years, Khan poured everything he had into planning the ultimate invasion. He gathered ships from Korea, China, and even Southeast Asia. Weapons were stockpiled, including those explosive bombs that had shocked the samurai in the first battle. And soldiers? He recruited them from every corner of his vast empire. Word of these preparations reached Japan, and it sent shivers down their spines. Imagine knowing that the largest army in history was gearing up specifically to crush you. Some samurai wanted to take the fight to the enemy, proposing to attack Korea to disrupt the Mongol preparations. It was a bold plan, but ultimately, cooler heads prevailed. Japan needed every warrior and every resource to defend their home. As the years ticked by, the tension in Japan grew. They knew the Mongols were coming, but they didn't know exactly when or where they would strike. It was like waiting for a typhoon you know is going to hit, but you can't see it yet. But here's the thing about the samurai. They had something the Mongols didn't. It wasn't better weapons or more soldiers. It was a code of honor called Bushido. This wasn't just about fighting techniques. Bushido was a way of life that emphasized loyalty, self-discipline, and facing death without fear. For 7 years, the samurai lived and breathed this code. They trained relentlessly, knowing that they might soon be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice for their land and their people. It gave them the strength to face what seemed like impossible odds. As the 7th year came to a close, both sides were ready for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of history. The Mongols had numbers, technology, and the confidence of an empire that had conquered most of the known world. The samurai had their skill, their new defenses, and an unbreakable spirit forged by Bushido. 7 years of preparation came down to this moment. The bravest samurai couldn't have imagined the scale of what was coming. Facing an army that outnumbers you 5-1 is terrifying, and that's exactly what Japan was up against in 1281, when Kublai Khan returned with a vengeance. Kublai Khan wasn't taking chances this time. He assembled a force of over 140,000 warriors, ready to crush Japan's defenses. When the Mongol fleet appeared on the horizon, it sent chills down the spines of even the most hardened samurai. The sea of ships stretched as far as the eye could see, packed with fierce warriors and deadly weapons. The battles were brutal. The Mongols used their numbers to overwhelm the Japanese defenders at every turn, launching wave after wave of attacks. Their advanced weaponry, explosive bombs, poisoned arrows, and siege engines tore through Japanese defenses like paper. The samurai fought with everything they had, knowing defeat meant the end of their way of life. They used every trick and tactic they'd developed over the past 7 years. The new stone walls along the coastline helped, but against such odds, it felt like holding back a tsunami with a sandcastle. For weeks, the fighting raged without a clear winner. The Japanese were pushed back, inch by bloody inch. They were exhausted, low on supplies, and facing an enemy with seemingly endless resources. But the samurai didn't know how to give up. Even as things looked bleakest, they kept fighting, driven by desperation and unbreakable spirit. Just when Japan seemed about to fall, the wind began to change. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon. As the breeze picked up and waves started to churn, a glimmer of hope spread through the samurai ranks. Could nature intervene once again? Then, history hit replay. A second divine wind struck, even more powerful than before. The Mongol fleet, despite its size, was no match for nature's fury. Massive waves crashed over ships, splintering wood, and sending thousands of warriors into the churning sea. The wind howled with such force it seemed like the gods themselves were roaring in defiance of the invaders. The storm raged on, destroying ship after ship. Mongol warriors, so fearsome on land, were helpless against the sea's power. Many drowned or were dashed against the rocks. the unstoppable invasion force, was being decimated before everyone's eyes. When the storm passed, the scene was utter devastation. The once mighty armada was reduced to scattered wreckage and floating debris. Tens of thousands of warriors now lay at the bottom of the sea. The beaches were littered with broken ships and bodies of those who reached shore, only to be cut down by waiting samurai. The waves calmed and the dust settled, but Japan's victory was just the beginning. Two freak storms reshaped the entire balance of power in Asia. Let me tell you how these divine winds changed the course of history. After the second failed invasion, Kublai Khan's reputation took a massive hit. The Mongol Empire, once thought unstoppable, had been defeated by a small island nation. This marked the beginning of the end for Mongol expansion in East Asia. According to historical records, Kublai Khan lost over 4,000 ships and 100,000 men in these failed invasions. That's like losing an entire army overnight. While the Mongols were recovering, Japan was thriving. The samurai became even more central to Japanese culture. Their code of honor and loyalty in the face of impossible odds became legendary. They weren't just warriors anymore. They were living symbols of Japan's strength. The divine wind, or kamikaze, that saved Japan twice became a powerful part of Japanese mythology. It was seen as proof that Japan had divine protection. This idea of Japan being a chosen land would shape Japanese culture and national identity for centuries. The impact wasn't just cultural, it was physical too. Those massive stone walls the samurai built to resist the Mongols changed Japan's coastline. These fortifications were a constant reminder of the threat Japan had faced and overcome. Here's a wild thought. Some historians argue that without these invasions, Japan might have become part of China. Before the Mongol invasions, Japan had been absorbing Chinese culture and political systems. But the invasions changed all that. They reinforced Japan's isolation and unique cultural development. The long-term effects were massive. The divine wind became more than just a historical event. It became a lasting symbol of Japan's perceived divine protection, fueling a sense of Japanese exceptionalism that would later drive their own imperial ambitions. The invasions also impacted Japan's art, literature, and military technology. Stories of the divine wind and brave samurai became popular themes in Japanese storytelling. The experience of fighting against advanced Mongol weapons forced the Japanese to innovate, laying the groundwork for future military developments. Economically, the aftermath saw a shift in power within Japan. The cost of coastal defenses led to increased taxation, changing the social and economic structure. It's like how modern creators have to invest in equipment and marketing to defend their place in the market. It changes the whole game. The Mongol invasions were a turning point in Japan's history. They didn't just save the country. They shaped its future, transforming Japan from a nation influenced by China to a unique and powerful force in Asia. This event set the stage for centuries of Japanese cultural development, military innovation, and eventually, its rise as a major world power. The Mongol invasions of Japan shaped the entire future of the nation. If those storms hadn't hit, Japan might have become part of Kublai Khan's empire. Instead, Japan's unique culture continued to develop in isolation for centuries, creating a world totally different from the rest of Asia. The samurai changed big time after facing the Mongols. Before the invasions, they were all about one-on-one duels and personal honor. But after seeing the Mongols fight in massive groups, they started training in group tactics. They worked together as a team instead of just showing off individual skills. This was a huge shift in Japanese warfare, making the samurai even more effective on the battlefield. The idea of Japan being protected by divine forces became huge in Japanese culture. The kamikaze, or divine wind, wasn't just a lucky break. It became a symbol of Japan's special status. This belief in divine protection influenced Japanese politics and culture for generations. It made the Japanese people feel invincible, like they had the gods on their side. Japan became more unified and confident after fighting off the Mongols twice. It also reinforced their isolation from the rest of the world. For centuries after the invasions, Japan remained closed off to most foreign influence. This isolation allowed Japanese culture to develop in its own unique way without being mixed with other Asian cultures. The invasions had a big impact on Japanese military tech too. After seeing the Mongols' weapons and tactics, the Japanese started improving their own. They developed new types of swords, armor, and fortifications. These advancements made Japan's military even stronger and more prepared for future threats. But it wasn't all positive changes. The cost of defending against the Mongols was huge. The government had to raise taxes to pay for all the new defenses and military preparations. This led to big changes in Japanese society. The samurai class saw their role and status change as the economy shifted. Some became more like administrators than warriors, managing lands and collecting taxes. The Mongol invasions also showed the limits of even the most powerful empires when faced with nature's fury. Kublai Khan had conquered most of Asia, but he couldn't overcome a couple of storms. This reminder of nature's power became a part of Japanese philosophy and art. You can see it in paintings and poems from the time, showing how small humans are compared to the forces of nature. The Mongol invasion of Japan remains one of history's greatest what-ifs. If not for the divine wind, would Japan have fallen? Would history have been rewritten? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you made it this far, you need to see our next video on another civilization that faced destruction.